For us humans, music tend to be another media and another form of transmitting and exchanging information between one another. And it turns out that we tend to be more biased towards simple integer ratios. And scientists believe that the reason we are more biased towards this simple integer ratio is because we have evolved such that this simple integer ratio makes it easier for us to create, produce, and maintain musical rhythms. While we now know that as humans, we tend to favor and be biased more towards simple integer ratio rhythms, which by the way means that, for example, it's a one-on-one ratio. Let's say you have 4 beats and then you have a equal time interval in between these 4 beats. The question is that, do these favoritism and bias differ if we are from different cultures, if we are from different societies? Because we know that a brain is a brain. That really doesn't differ when it comes to it processing information to the extent that we are knowledgeable about. But the question here is that when it comes to us preferring these different rhythms, these different waves of music, are there any biases when it comes to different cultures? These scientists first look at the existing body of knowledge where we had some information and some data, for example, gathered from people from the United States and also from the Amazons, Bolivia, I believe it was. But also they conducted their own research where they gathered participants from 15 different countries across 5 different continents. And it turned out that this bias towards the simple integer ratio that we already talked about definitely was a universal thing that was pertinent to all these countries, no matter where the society and where the tribes even, or which countries or lands the participants came from. But there were still some differences when it came to different cultures, which were quite subtle. When listening to music, our brains tend to correct the music that we're listening to. For example, if there are some errors, even if they're very small errors in a music that we're listening to, a piece of music, let's say, we tend to automatically correct those small mistakes that we hear in the music. A lot of times we're not even aware of it. But for us, it sounds okay, it sounds good, even if there are very small errors. Maybe very trained ears who are musicians can be less biased towards those errors. But for other people in general, we tend to correct these musical errors that we hear if we hear them in a piece of music. And the way in which we correct these musical errors in our head tend to be biased towards the type of music that we come from, the society and the environment that we were brought up within has made us be more biased towards specific type of rhythms. And so when we correct the music that we hear, we tend to correct it based on our implicit knowledge, implicit perception, and bias towards the music that we were listening to during our upbringings or the society that we are coming from. And so the subtlety between these 15 different countries that these scientists were able to grasp and reveal and understand was that the way in which we tend to correct implicitly any wrong musical notes that we hear tend to be biased towards the type of music that we were listening to during our upbringing or the society that we come from. For example, the participants that were from the United States or from Western European countries in comparison to participants that were, let's say, from Turkey or the Amazons, they tended to implicitly correct these defaults in, or errors, I should say, in the musical tunes based on the country and based on the society that they were coming from. In other words, these two different groups, let's say Western in comparison to Eastern countries, their brain tended to correct the musical tunes that they heard in their brain differently from one another because they were brought up from different type of musical tunes. These scientists believe that these type of findings are extremely important because it helps us obviously take another baby steps towards understanding our brain better, but also towards how our brain processes and understands rhythms, which in turn are waves. These are waves of information that, in this case with music, we exchange information and transfer information. And also it helps us understand the way in which we perceive these informational exchange and also the way in which we produce music, of course. But it's also very important to remember that all these baby steps are, although seemingly very trivial at some point, gradually they add up to the body of knowledge. So we start gradually understanding our brain. And because in this channel we talk primarily about brain waves and information exchange at the wave format and wave level, these type of information become extra important and substantial.